If you've ever played Guilty Gear for an extended period of time, you're probably familiar with this. This is a burst. It's pretty simple. By pressing Dust and any other attack button while having a full burst meter, your character strikes a pose, sends out a blue shockwave, and says a witty one-liner. Bursts come in two forms. Your blue burst is activated while you're getting hit or while you're in block stun. If it hits the opponent, it will send them flying and break whatever combo that they are currently doing, assuming that it isn't blocked or thrown. And if you use it while in neutral, you get a golden version. This gives you a bonus to your meter, generally filling it to max. It is a universally well-regarded mechanic, to the point where anytime something similar appears in a different fighting game, it's generally just called bursting. But how did it come about? Was the mechanic fully formed out of the gate? Were there more colors than just blue and gold? I hope not. Why would you add a different color? God, could you imagine if it was like green or something? Oh, that'd be terrible. Well, let's look back at the past. Let's talk about the evolution of burst. So let's go back to the very beginning. Arxis had made a few fighting game titles before Missing Link, but none of them have burst in it, so they're not really relevant to what we're talking about. So how about we go back and we check how the original Guilty Gear handled burst. There's nothing. Thank you, son. The original Guilty Gear had no bursting in it. But also, it didn't have a lot of staple Guilty Gear mechanics. Roam and cancel wasn't a thing. Instead, we had something that was probably a bug that allowed you to taunt to cancel your current action and go back to neutral. I don't know what you want me to say. There's literally no burst. It isn't here. What, you want me to talk about something that isn't there? You want me to talk about fucking leprechauns and shit as well? Like, there was still a defensive mechanic in the game. It was a mystical thing. An esoteric and unheard of mechanic never seen before in another fighting game. Modern philosophers know it as blocking. Missing Link is a fascinating piece of Guilty Gear history that's powered by hope, dreams, and lossy file compression. And considering the fact that this came out on the PlayStation 1 and still functions, is honestly a miracle. So much of a miracle that eventually they made a sequel. Guilty Gear X is where the series really began to take shape, with characters getting their more iconic designs and actually looking like their portraits. Kind of. And surely, now that we've gone up a whole console generation and even got a full arcade port, surely now we'll see the defining mechanic that made Guilty Gear. And we do! But it's not burst. Tension has 4 uses in this game: faultless defense, roam and cancel, overdrives, and our second ever defensive mechanic, dead angle. Yeah, dead angle is somehow older than burst. I am shocked. Until I think about it for more than a second. Dead angle, at least in this game, gets you out of any block string as long as the opponent doesn't block it. So what if we made a mechanic where you can do that, but instead of block stun, it's hit stun? Ah, that's stupid. Honest, cheapify this soul bad guy. Eventually, after Petite, they decided to make a sequel to Guilty Gear X, calling it Guilty Gear XX, The Midnight Carnival. This game added Eno as the primary antagonist, as well as Slayer, Bridget, and... Fun fact, Robokai is banned from competition in this game, even though he was a character in Guilty Gear X. I think we should continue this trend going forward. For the first time in the game series, though, we have a dedicated dust button, which means we can finally press dust and another button at the same time. And when we do... Yes! With the introduction of burst, we can see how its original form was created. And it doesn't change much. In the Midnight Carnival, there are 2 versions of burst. Like I always said before, if you use it while getting hit, you get a blue burst that causes the opponent to fly away and breaks their combo. If you use it in neutral, you get a gold burst that fills your tension gauge completely. The burst gauge in this game is filled up by doing stuff. I didn't play enough of the Midnight Carnival to figure out the specifics. And you can tell when it's ready because it starts doing a rave strobe light at you. Burst can be baited by avoiding the blast of the attack, blocking the blast of the attack, or throwing the opponent during their startup. You also have the option to use your own burst to avoid theirs. It's pretty sick. Also useless, but pretty sick. And from here, burst remained pretty much unchanged for every edition of XX. The developers decided instead of tweaking old features, they'd just add more and more on top of each iteration of the game. Like how in Slash, they decided to have new characters like Hoss and Abba.
Jesus Christ, she looks like she's out of Gorillas!
Accent Core adding Force Roman cancels, Throw Breaks, and Slashback, and Plus R adding... But in all of these titles, burst works pretty much the same, with the only major differences being how the gauge looks. And this is where burst in the series would solidify for the foreseeable future, as the franchise drove itself off a cliff. As you may know by this point, Arxis lost the right to all of the X and XX characters in the mid-2000s, which is why Guilty Gear 2 is the way that it is. But it forced them to make a new, different fighting game. And this is where I'm getting really excited, because while Guilty Gear got burst almost perfect to the moment they implemented it, BlazBlue got really weird with how its burst worked. I've talked about Calamity Trigger before on the channel, and honestly, I'm kind of hating the fact that I have to go back to this one. It's a weird game. Like a really, really weird game. It has a Libra gauge. Burst does make an appearance in this game. In fact, it's in every BlazBlue fighting game, as far as I can tell. It works significantly differently in this game. Bursting in neutral and during a combo will both give you the same kind of burst, visually. Every burst has a bunch of different properties depending on when it's used. If used in neutral, every burst has 32 frames of startup, 4 frames of advantage, and has a full duration of 64 frames? Oh! If it hits the opponent, it puts them into a hard knockdown state, where they're not able to tech, but if they block it, it leaves you plus on block, because why wouldn't it? Depending on what kind of burst you do, it gives you more damage to the Libra gauge, with the worst burst doing absolutely nothing, and the best burst giving you 200%, which, for context, is essentially an unblockable guard break move. Okay. Sure! Now, before we go on to how you would normally use burst, we should probably talk about how you get the different versions. This iteration of burst is called Barrier Burst, and it interacts directly with the barrier gauge. If you have full barrier, you get a maximum barrier burst, aka a gold burst. If you have less than 50%, you get the worst barrier burst, aka a blue burst. And if you have less than 100% and over 50, you get a middle ground burst, which is... Oh no! The burst properties change depending on which one it is. Mainly the startup, with the worst burst taking 32 full frames to come out. That's over half a second, by the way. Burst availability is shown with the red burst icon in the corner, and after using it, you lose access to your barrier gauge and get forced into danger. As a general reminder, barrier is the replacement for faultless defense in this game, and if you're in danger, you take, like, double damage. It's really bad. Safe to say they took a couple of swings with this one. Calamity Trigger is such a weird game, and while I admire their attempts to experiment with new features, a lot of things CT tried to do could best be described as misses. The Libra gauge never made a return in any other game, and trust me, that's a good thing. And because of that, they had to adjust how burst worked, since it no longer had the system that it directly interacted with while using it in a neutral state. So they changed it back to a more recognizable form in the next game, being completely disconnected from the barrier gauge and having two variants. Gold Burst is used in neutral and gives you a free combo starter, and using it during block and hitstun makes it green. Why is it green? The unique thing about Continuum Shift Burst, apart from it being called the Break Burst, is that it's linked to this icon. If you burst, you consume it completely. How do you get it back? Die! When losing a round, you gain a burst, meaning you have a maximum of 2 bursts for the entire game. It's definitely more recognizable, but not being able to build it back leads to a situation where you're kinda just using it for momentum swings and to save yourself. The only real thought exercise you need to do is if you want to save 2 bursts for a second round, which I guess could be fun if you really, really like shoving your opponent into the other side of the screen, but having 2 bursts maximum per match and no way to build it back up doesn't feel as interesting, at least for me. Chrono Phantasma changed it a little bit more, allowing you to fill the burst gauge again, but changing it so that it's only one color with one single purpose. I swear to God, if it turns out it's gonna be green, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. Oh, thank God. The reason it's only one type of burst, though, is because there's a completely new feature added to the game that uses this gauge. This is the Overdrive system. Overdrives are activated by using burst while in a neutral situation, and they give you a massive buff to your character for a variable amount of time, depending on how much health that you have. These buffs are different from character to character, and generally empower their unique drive gimmicks. For example, Ragnar gets enhancements on his life-stealing abilities. If you use Burst on block, you activate into Overdrive, however, halve the amount of time that you have in the Overdrive state. Now we have some interesting decisions on our Burst meter again. Tying it to a new resource that could potentially swing the entire momentum of the game and have it fill up over time allows for players to make decisions with the system at hand. This is the way that BlazBlue Burst works to this day, ignore BB tag, and it's gone from a worse version of an existing system to one that's actually interesting and unique. I enjoy the way that BlazBlue handles its burst system, linking it to an extra system that gives the mechanic more to think about than just "Fuck, I'm gonna die! Burst, please! Please, 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 please." During the time of BlazBlue, the original version of XR released, and Burst is the exact same as it was in the XX games. If it ain't broke, right? In the later versions, they added something called Burst Overdrives, in which you can spend 50% tension and your whole burst meter to do a super that deals extra damage. Not as cool as Overdrives in BlazBlue if you ask me, but being able to throw away your strongest defensive resource for an offensive attack is a massive flex. XR focused much more on the ways that you can use tension rather than the burst meter, so having it stay as something quite recognizable with one new gimmick added to it is pretty cool. There's also some smaller ways to influence the burst gauge to fill a little bit more. The main one I know is blitz shielding, where when you successfully reject an attack, you actually gain a little bit of your burst meter back. But in general, XX's variation of burst and XR's are pretty much the same. Before starting this, I assumed that there would be more differences like there was with Roman cancels, but it seems that burst as a mechanic was almost perfected from the moment they made it. There's nothing you can really do to change it. No more room to innovate. Burst has hit its final form. Well, when Strive originally released, Burst worked pretty much the same as it did in XR, with 2 notable exceptions. Burst overdrives had been removed, and bursts can no longer be thrown. This is more due to how throws were overhauled in Strive compared to previous games. Originally, throws were proximity triggered. If you were close enough to throw and pressed forward and heavy slash, then you would throw the opponent on frame 1, assuming you're not also moving or a bunch of other stuff that happens, but shh, don't worry about it. In Strive, throws are triggered by pressing forward or back and dust. They come out on frame 2, and they're not triggered by proximity, meaning that you can completely whiff them. It's never been directly addressed why burst can't be thrown in Strive, but I personally like to imagine it's because of this change. Or maybe the devs just wanted you to actually bait it like a grown-up and just block it! For the first 2 seasons of Strive, this is just how it was. Same as the previous games without the ability to throw it. But once Season 3 hit, Arxis goes, you know what? Fuck it. Size of the burst? Fuck you. 4 meter on gold burst? Nah, fuck you. Positive bonus. Only one thing you can do with a burst gauge? Fuck you. Offensive and defensive mechanics tied to it. 1 burst per round? Fuck you. Gauge bills on wall stick now. Eat shit! Season 3 was definitely the season of throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. But if you ask me, Deflect Shield and Wild Assault are some of the more interesting mechanics that they've added over the course of this game. The fact that we have pretty powerful mechanics tied to the burst gauge now means that there's more for players in Strive to think about than just, do I get my burst gauge back? And should I spend it because I want the meter? It's not a perfect system. Anyone who's been playing Strive for an elongated period of time knows that Wild Assault has been an absolute nightmare to balance, with every color being broken at some point. A Deflect Shield is a super niche mechanic that only ever really comes up in very specific situations, but having them there and having them be options is still something that I personally enjoy. I will say, BlazBlue's OD I think is a more elegant solution to making you think about your burst gauge, but I like that Arxis is at least trying different things. Buffing Blue Burst so that you can't just bait it by doing a safe string is a genius decision that I love. It leads to more interaction between the two players, and it's so fucking cool, and I really like it. It's definitely not a perfect system. Some people would say that the way that Xrd and XX handles their burst was a perfect system, and it doesn't need to be altered at all. And while I kind of agree with them, I'm also not against smashing up a machine to see if we can rebuild it better. Strive is very strange in comparison to the other Guilty Gear games, but the fact that it changed the mechanics so much that it made me think that I could go back and look at how they used to do it and see as many changes is one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much. I'm very excited to see how this mechanic and every other mechanic changes in the future. And I hope to see Burst evolve into a more interesting mechanic as time goes on. Sometimes you get something right immediately, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try and experiment with it. You never know, it might turn out that you find something that's even better the more that you look. Thank you all for watching, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll hopefully get another video out by the end of January. Not entirely sure what it's going to be on, but it should be fighting game focused. And it's going to be good. It's going to be sick. If you want more of me, I have a Twitch where I stream 4 days a week. I have a second channel where I do like 5 uploads a week. I have a Twitter. I hate that site, but I have one. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye!